good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Depends on you, wherever you are here. We are here in completely different time zones, right? So let me call all my friends here. Hey, Chila, how are you?
Oh, hey, Pedro, I am fine. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Thanks to be our admin today here. Hey, Douglas, how are you, man?
Hey, good to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, today we're gonna have a very interesting topic that is mastering software testing. This is a nice topic. Every time we talk about testing, that we can have lots of discussions. We can have lots of different stories about it. So yeah, I can say that, or today we don't have our friend Hugo. Hugo cannot join today. Neither Danilo. So well, we hope they can join us in the next time. Money. I think he can join like later here, and you and maybe Bruno as well. We don't know. Well, Bruno, we always have like this surprises when he suddenly join us. But yeah, well, we can start our discussion here with us. So today's topic is software testing, and I think we can start talking about how we are using testing in our companies or in our lives today. Uh, are we using tests at all? Do we think testing is good, or we don't need testing? Or what do you think, people? What do you think, Sheila?
Yes, I think we need testing. If you want to ensure the quality of your software or improve the quality of your software and how you do testing, it has changed a lot during
Hmm.
the years. Because when I started a lot of years ago, then you had almost no testing tools. So you mainly you tested manually a lot. There have been also some departments or groups just with testers, and we developed the software. And then there have been a testing group just to test it, and then you deploy that software. But it has been in the old days, so it has changed a lot since then, because today we are using automated test tools, and that's normal today.
Oh yeah, it's very
I would
important, right?
I would say that my experience over the years has been different depending on where I'm at and what the main goal is. So, there have been companies I've worked for that they had automated testing, of course, right? They had we had automated testing. Additionally, because this company was an enterprise company that they provided enterprise solutions to other companies, there was always this "it has to be right" mentality about that. So they didn't want to release a bug, because if they released a bug in that software, then potentially data loss could occur, or and that was actually what the product was. It was actually a security product to keep stuff from like that from happening. So how what is the risk of what happens if things go wrong is definitely a question that would go through someone's head. So we had automated testing, but additionally, on top of that, on our team, we actually had an embedded QA person that whenever we wrote code and was ready for them to test, they were immediately available to test our code in Sprint. So this is actually one place I worked that really did agile,
Hmm.
that really subscribed to it. I was pair
Hmm.
programming, and whenever we would whenever our code was done, we'd pass it over to the QA person. The QA person would do things to it, and come back and say, hey, looks good, hey, didn't look good here. Now, again, I just described two things, right?
Hmm.
At this company, we had automated testing to try to catch some things, but then in the end, because of how important it was to be sure that we didn't release a bug, that because even automated tests, you can get it wrong, you can
Hmm.
you can get that wrong. So you have very experienced people, And our QA person could have been a software developer. Like the way that he thought about things, he could have been an engineer. Even though you have to engineer this stuff when you're a tester. So a really good software tester is going to be thinking about a lot of interesting things if they're doing this manually. First of all, they have tools too, right? They have manual testing tools that have like the test plans, and they can click a button that said we did this and it succeeded, or we it didn't succeed, and here's all the here's everything about how it didn't succeed. But the thing is that I guess it really depends, right? The old days, I've worked at companies where they did not do any automated testing, which boggled my mind. I was actually one of the people that blazed a trail in this company, this other company I worked for, where I basically said I wouldn't develop this unless you let me write automated tests for it to prove to myself that it works, because it's taking money out of people's checking account. Like that was, I was not going to have it happen where we missed a decimal place somewhere and took out, instead of taking, $100 out, we took like $1,000 or $10,000 out. I just wasn't going to let that happen. And I was writing code that would literally yank money out of someone's account. So, they actually had a QA department with a full lab with all the equipment that would be used in production. This is two different companies. This is another company I worked for, but they didn't have any automated testing at the time. They didn't believe in automated testing.
All tests are manual.
All tests were manual at this company, but they had a full department with equipment and everything that mimicked production. I mean,
it was software for enterprise. It's not a web for software.
Both of these companies were not web related, right? Okay. So the two companies I'm talking about, one company was a retail fuel company. The other company I'm talking about was email security. So two, domains that were not like you're writing public facing websites for people. This was stuff that, the retail fuel company had basically a full lab with multiple setups with actual gas pumps and everything inside their lab to test all the point of sale software, to test all the software that we had going out to the field, to test everything inside a lab. They didn't want to put money into into writing, slow the developers down and that's an interesting point. They didn't want to slow developers down by having them write tests, because they had the test plan in the QA department, and the QA department was going to catch that stuff. So it also depends on how the people who lead those departments believe. Now, I basically said, there's no way because I said, I'm not writing this unless you let me write some automated, write actual unit testing and some integration testing in my code to be sure that we're going to do what we say, because I'm just not going to put my name on code that goes out and pulls money, out of people's checking account without being sure that in my own mind I can prove it works. So
it's interesting. Let me just all people that are in the comments. So I'm seeing here Andre say, it's a necessary thing, and Ronaldo is saying the same. It's necessary, and of course, Ronaldo say hi to all of us. So thanks. So now then, thank everybody here that are listening to us. Please come and make some comments. Call us here in the chat. Then you can discuss here this testing stuff, because this is really we have lots of questions about it. As you said, you have. I think we can divide these different ways of doing tests here when we have different kind of systems. As you said, we have like enterprise here, or systems that are installed in the customers. You create you have like some kind of software that you cannot update in an easy way, right? So you can imagine if you find like a tiny bug in the middle after the installation, and you say, how long it's gonna take to be fix it. You say, our cycle deployment time is 6 months, right? Or yearly sometimes. Or I think it's been like it was this week that Mastercard was doing a big rollout of deployment. I don't know if you heard about it.
I hadn't.
I was reading in the Twitter, and they are talking about saying, "Oh, Mastercard is doing a huge rollout about updating the APIs, updating endpoint." I don't know if you have any more information here in the chat. Please, if you have more, please add here for us. But you can imagine a huge rollout like that, and you have an infinite amount of people connecting to this kind of
Yeah.
to these endpoints, or using machines, or having internet based, not internet based, machine based, in completely different kind of softwares here, and then you find a bug in a system like that. So it's.
Mhm.
Do you have any stories like this, Douglas?
So, I mean, the when I worked for the retail fuel company, so this was I worked at the home office of a pretty large of a fairly large company that provided retail fuel. They were in front of they are in front of almost every Walmart that you would go around in the United States.
Oh my.
And whenever they would do a software release, like there's two different types of releases, right? They had like tools that the employees would use, and that would go over like an intranet portal that each station, there were like almost 1,200 of them when I worked for them back when I worked for them a long time ago. There are more now, but there were like 1,200 stores. And see, here's the thing: is that all the software inside the stores, the things that were checking for levels in their fuel tanks, because they have to, everyone has to check for levels, the thing that pushes prices out to all the stores, because they have to be able to push new prices out to the stores. They centrally controlled all the pricing at the stores. No one went out and flipped the signs. It was all electric signs at
Oh.
every store. So
Oh.
someone pushes a button on software that our group, that the group that I worked in maintained, then prices go out to all the new stores. You have to be sure that the thing receiving the price change notifications is doing what it's supposed to. It doesn't do anything if it gets some weird notification, right? Like someone's trying to mess with it or something. And so, as far as like if something goes wrong, depending on the system, the web-based system, you update the web, right? You update you update what's running on the server, and then everything's happy and all of that stuff. But if you push out a change that for instance, may mess up gathering maybe the transactions in the past hour, because it's if you've got this many stores going on and you're trying to get all of their transactions and put them in a centralized location, then something's always out there monitoring for that, monitoring for fuel levels, monitoring for all of these things. You are bound to have problems. And don't get me started if someone actually brings a USB device into a store, plugs it in, and actually puts a virus on the network. That's a whole different can of worms too. So even just securing the machines, I think while I was there at some point, they did have that happen and had to lock down all the USB ports on all the machines sitting in the store because someone put a virus onto the network, which is that's an example of what are they, a black swan event, right? No one's thinking that your own employees are going to come in and bring, well, nowadays they are going to think about it, but I think back then it just wasn't something that people thought that hey, we're not loading, we're not letting them load anything. They just plugged something in of theirs and it happened to start messing around with the network. They happened to have a virus in this thing. So when you have a situation like that, maybe even the idea of automated testing isn't going to give you everything that you need to be able to respond fast. So when and I'm thinking about my time back then, if you're in a situation where something can go wrong and you can't really figure out why, or not that you can't figure out why, but you didn't know that this was going to happen. Like you're basically seeing something you've never seen before. It's novel. It's an emergent problem. Then at that point, you invest your time in emergency response instead of you do as much as you can. We had a whole QA department with a whole lab that looked like a gas station inside inside the building that they could actually do all test all the stuff, the point of sale software and the intranet portal and all of that stuff. They could simulate actually being there. But instead of spending a lot of time on maybe automated testing, people use their brain, their bandwidth on how to handle problems that come up quickly, because you're not going to catch everything in testing. I can't say, because remember, when I was at that company, I was fighting for writing unit tests. I was the only one doing it. Because I would not write.
And it was not the culture, and probably was not. It was not the. And probably you lost that fight, right?
Well, no, I did.
No?
Basically, they told me I had like 2 months to do something, and no, it was like 6 weeks, and I told them it would take 3 months, and so I did 3 months of work in 6 weeks. I worked a lot of overtime, but I wrote the system with the tests, and I will tell you one thing: that system never had an emergency change request.
Wow, this is interesting, right?
Yeah, I mean that system didn't. And one more thing, I'll give you a little bit of like the end of this system, because I did actually know. I know when the system was taken down. It was taken down around 8 years after I wrote it. And do you know why it was taken down? It ran.
How many? Sorry?
8 years. It ran for 8 years. Oh. And do you know what? They called me 8 years later during the pandemic and said, "Hey, you don't happen to have the source code, do you? Because we can't find it." I'm like, "You haven't touched that thing in 8 years? Like what?"
They lost it. Oh shit.
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing is that I wrote
not a problem.
That's a new problem, right? Because when
you don't have to
touch the system, when you don't have to touch the system, then there's a new problem. You need to be trying to keep track of everything you've got with that system, because maybe someday you do need to change. Like it was running on Java 5, and it was time to upgrade. It was
Java 5.
I mean, one component of it was running on Java 5, right? And they needed to upgrade that one component, but they couldn't. They couldn't get the source for it. I wrote it in .NET, so the main pieces of that payment system that I wrote were written in C# and in .NET. But I also wrote. I had to interface with some external system with a reference Java driver that they gave us, and so I had to actually write the other part of it in Java, and then come up with an interoperability layer to get the data into .NET, and it was really cool. It was actually a really cool project. But like I said,
I can imagine.
It was written to be tolerant. It was written to be flexible, because how you communicated with this payment system was through text messaging. And this was before everyone had smartphones. So, that was part of my tests, where I actually wrote a text message, or, message interpreting, I had to be able to process commands that were coming in over text messaging, and, and do some cool stuff with that. So that was the side that was Java, was the part that interfaced with that. But what I'm saying is that it just ran.
Yeah, Ender says something interesting here. Right? It's more exciting to solve problems than writing the test, though. For sure, I can imagine. I can imagine that you spend like 6 weeks writing all that tests, right?
I was writing. So I really subscribed at the time to this idea of test-driven development. So I basically was writing code and my tests at the same time.
Oh, right. You're not just writing the code for writing the test for the code that's already there.
Every layer of my system that I architected, I had tests around it. I was making sure that every layer communicated the way that I expected it to. And that was during my time where I loved complexity. So I had all these tests to test the communication between the different layers of the system, and I had architectural boundaries, and I had that I maintained, and so
this is awesome. Andrea said, I say there are systems over there that I wrote that I have been there for more than a decade. I always pray they do not call me to make any modification.
One tip I'll give you is any company ever calls you and asks you if you have their source code, you say no. You say no. Like look, I don't take.
You cannot say yes. You can imagine like 80 years later, say you have the source code. Say you have the source code for 80 years.
First of all, I would never carry source code with me, but I'm saying from a legal standpoint, if you are ever asked by a former employer if you have their source code, you say no, no matter what. I would never take, I mean, I've rewritten things before. I know other people that I've worked with who've told me that they've taken components with them. Like they wrote the code and they're like, it's my code. And so they'll take it with them. I don't. I just rewrite it. I know how I did it. And it's when I rewrite it again, it's better. Like the next
And
time I
it's
do
not
it, it's
your
better.
code.
I don't want the old stuff.
Yeah, and it's not your code, right? It's
When you
not
work
your
for
code.
hire, it is absolutely, it's a
Yeah.
bad mindset to be in. That's a really bad mindset, right? What's mine is my experience in writing the code. That's mine. And so I get to see what worked and what didn't. And if someone tells me to do it again, I get to do it again. And I get to fix all
Sure.
the mistakes I made the last time because we're not perfect and we don't, and then that's where testing comes into play, right?
Yeah, that the idea, right? When we sorry, Chila, do you want to say something?
No, just
No.
continue.
Oh, but
Oh, with
please,
all software.
we talk a lot here. But
It's
if you
horrible. Yeah.
want to say something, just please. And let me ask you about your experience on that. I know you are a data scientist and work with data, and so and how testing is in the data, how can I say, in the data market, how spread it is. I know, of course, we in development, there are lots of people say, oh, it's good to test, we need to write tests, but in the data market, how is it?
Mm-hmm. Well, I have more experience on backend and front end testing, and that's an interesting issue, or an interesting question, how to test with large data. So I don't know if Douglas, do you have experience with?
No,
Just,
do you in your company today? Do you have testing culture for this part or no?
Sheila, do you have any tests for the large data sets that because I know here's what I do know, like
Mhm.
from the data science side of things, is that not only do you have the data that you train on, you also have a test data set too that you use to be sure that
Yes.
your data,
Mhm.
yeah, so you do actually have something where that's how you prove
Actually,
that
yes.
your
Yeah.
models work,
Sure.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. I have some experience with that because I've worked with a couple of data scientists in the past, and they always tell me that you have to like randomly split your data set so that you have some data that you use to train on, you have some data
Mhm.
that you use to actually test to be sure that you trained it properly and that it can handle things, avoid things like overfitting and stuff like that. But um, I will say that I'm speaking as more of, I don't give myself enough credit. I do like look into this stuff a lot, but I have to say I speak more of this from someone who can use the abstractions and have had enough conversations with data science type people to know um, to know about those kind of things. But the thing that I'm curious about is, and I'm going to have to start looking into this myself because I want to make some data driven applications and I want to make some stuff that's driven by models. Is
Uh-huh.
what is the test strategy other than the test the test set versus the train set to get a model. How do you keep testing it as time goes on to be sure that your data has been accurate and your model is still doing what you think it should be doing?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yes,
this is sorry.
that's an
Go ahead.
interesting question. Yes. And it's also starting with if you have a large amount of data that you first of all you don't want to take over all those data just untouched, but you want to clean the data before, make sure that your input data has a minimum of quality, and then you can have several tests or quality tests applied on it just to make sure that the data is has a minimum of quality or the data is reliable. So I think it belongs to the first steps, just to make sure that the data is clean, reliable, and ready to be processed after that.
Sheila, how would you then? Do you have an automated method for like making sure that your data is clean to that standard that you've got? What kind of tools would be used to do something like that?
We have got some software applications, so where we are just running them automatically, and they are doing some testing on the data, and then the test results will be, and then it's also, well, it's depending on. It's also possible that the data will be modified or after that. If you, for example, if we have got measured data, some measurements are coming in, and for some reason we have got a gap in between. You don't have any input data, and what can you do? Then you can have certain algorithms just to interpolate data and try to fill in that gap. So this is only one method, but you can have a lot of methods like this, just to make sure, okay, data is okay, or is it possible that the data has got this value or not? And then you can apply a set of rules on that. So this is one of the methods what we can use, and actually we are using it before they are processed afterwards.
Okay, and that's so the the interpolation, the filling in of the gaps is part of getting it to the point where it's like meeting that minimum specification of you being able to take the data in and it being good data to pull in versus it being being bad, being data that might actually harm the system trying to keep track of everything. No, I get that.
Yes,
So
because you are aggregating the data after that, and if you are having a little error or something mistake in it, then it's getting bigger afterwards.
Yeah, when your aggregations, the butterfly effect, right? So a butterfly flapping its wings in China causes hurricanes and across the world, right? That's yeah, I mean, it can have a huge effect. Just a little mistake in the data. That's actually what that was all about, right? Was not that they actually believe that a butterfly flapping its wings would cause a hurricane. It was that there was such a minute disruption in the data of a very small infinitesimal error that would have been the equivalent of the equivalent of that would have been a butterfly flapping its wings. That caused the weather data model to go so crazy that they had to that's what the whole butterfly effect was, is that little bit of data can cause such a huge disruption in the end data. And that's what you're talking about, is that you got to be sure that everything that you expect. So I guess the interesting thing about that from a testing perspective and on the data side of things is that, so what you said is you've got software that sits there and you put the rules into this software, and this software then monitors the data as it's getting ready to come in, and it makes sure to make changes, or it rejects the batch, or it does something based on if it can't fix the problem, it's got to let you know, and then you have to come in and fix it. Yeah, that's cool. So it's on the data side, right? That's automated testing on trying to be sure your data coming in. Engineers, right?
Oh yeah. Talking about that, I would say I remember when you were showing the LLM stuff, Lynn, some weeks ago, and I was thinking about testing this stuff. You say, how can I assure, for example, that my system that uses this kind of not deterministic results, how can we assure that it's working okay, right? Say at least in a level that we think it's okay. So I think it's a problem, right? It's a problem that many of these startups is having now.
I have a thought around that. I mean, there's no way that we're going to know everything, and there's something that's being done now. If you look at how ChatGPT works, they have the button with the thumbs up and thumbs down, and you can tell it got it wrong and send them feedback, and that's exactly what you could do in an automated form too. Like if something is supposed to translate something into an object and it blows up, you can monitor for the fact that it blew up and you had to try again,
Mm-hmm.
and keep those, put those in logs somewhere and have something that sends like a dashboard that comes through and says, here were the times where your algorithm failed and didn't actually create the object from what they said. And you can look at that and then start going, oh, okay, I need to engineer for this. And then another step that you can take is from that point, you could even create a fine tuning data set at that point. So you can actually start fine tuning the LLM with additional questions and additional prompts and responses
And easy prompts.
to give it a little bit more smarts with the direction that you're trying to head down, as opposed to just hoping and praying. Which when you first put it,
hoping the LLM is
when you first
always
put it
showing the correct format.
Yeah. It's a hope and a prayer when you first throw it into the wild, but then over time you would get.
Yeah, and I can imagine that, for example, when we are using OpenAI and then we want to change to Llama 2 or want to change to any other LLM, and then you say, how do I make sure this is gonna work? And then you need to have like some sort of test suite that you can run and say, okay, it's working or not, right?
So the other thing you could do,
rating just
well, I was gonna say, if you log all the prompts and you can log all the responses that came back from it, you could actually create an automated test set. You could create a set of what people have asked for in the past and what your other model did, and look at what it's doing. You could just run through all the prompts that the system had handled before and be sure that the responses are going to be similar, usable. To what came out. You actually get a lot of test data. There's something interesting that just came to mind too about this test data thing. That you can also ask ChatGPT or the LLMs to help you put together. GPT-4 is really good at this, to help you put together data sets like that. Questions and responses. Yeah. So you could actually put it together, maybe put test sets together and put together, even data sets to go into your fine tuning process.
Wow, interesting.
I
was reading. I think it was you that shared one paper about something, some stuff. I don't remember exactly what, but they were using the OpenAI, the llama from OpenAI, to verify, to check if the answer of the other LLM was correct. It says, so you get an answer from an LLM and you send to the OpenAI and say, oh, is that correct? And say, yeah, it's that correct. Using an LLM to test the other LLM. It's nice.
Use your tools, right? Use your tools. You can do all sorts of neat stuff with that.
Exactly, and it works. I think, and even today, today is much more because we are trying to using smaller LLMs to do the same. So you actually can use try the smaller one and say, oh, go to the bigger one and ask and verify if it's okay, right? This is cool.
One thing I can kind of envision, and this has kind of been my path in the whole machine learning and AI side of things, when it was all like math, right? And the idea of trying to access the way models worked and all of that stuff just seemed really out of reach to me. I didn't really jump in there and try to dig into it. But when the abstractions got easy enough that I could follow a YouTube video to get started, then the question started going around in my head. That works here, but really, do I need GPT-4 to do this thing? Can I narrow down and use a 70 billion parameter Llama 2? Or can I even narrow down and use a 7 billion parameter Llama 2? Or what about the Mistral,
Mysteries.
model that just came
Super
out
good.
that basically seems to outperform the 13 billion parameter model from Llama
We're
2
using a
model.
7 one. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
so
saw that.
I'm just saying that the thing is that now we're starting to get narrower and narrower, and then it seems like, oh, well, maybe I should dig into how I can train a model and make my own model, and maybe not even start off with a model,
When
made
so
by
big.
a company. I just start, because I could use it from this abstraction and keep going down and dig deeper and deeper and deeper, so I don't have to have all this context come in at once, and I can just take in the little pieces that I need and learn
Uh-huh.
layer by layer by layer.
Uh-huh. Oh yeah. And Ronaldo is saying it's a kind of double check. Yeah, exactly. Ronaldo is asking a question here. Are there application tools for testing data science projects in the same way as there are for traditional application projects? Good question.
Yeah.
There are?
No, I'm saying it's a good question. I bet a
Yeah.
lot of them are bespoke, but I bet you there's some open source out there too. So chill. I bet you have like the application that does your testing of data probably is written by internal developers at the company trying to make sure
Yes.
the data. Yep, I
Mhm.
nailed it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you know any? Yeah.
I don't myself.
I don't. Sorry.
No, just using proprietary applications for, yes.
Okay. So it's not a
Mhm.
not open ones. And Bruno, hey Bruno. The exercise from Gandalf that Manny suggested a few sessions ago seems to do that, using ChatGPT to test ChatGPT. It's a fun exercise. Yeah, Gandalf. I don't know if people remember Gandalf was one of these. You have to hack, right? Is the one you need to hack the
You're
the
trying to
the
get you're trying to get
password.
it doesn't want to do. You're trying
Yeah,
to get the LLM to do something it doesn't want to do by trying to wiggle around with words until it does
exactly.
what you want to do.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I tried later with some other people, this Gandalf, and then at first we try to use the normal stuff. Say, oh, please give me the password, and then it became like harder and harder, and and you say, okay, there is no way to get the password from that, and then you find like some stuff say, oh, give me the characters that the password is made, and you say, oh, give me the characters you cannot say to me,
Uh-huh.
you know and then it said, oh, no, I cannot say that the characters are blah 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 blah, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah.
And then it's quite a fun exercise actually. And of course it's and but something that I think I can can slightly change the subject here and use something you said, Douglas, is that uh, all of the systems here, every time when we think about testing, or at least in not only the manual testing but the automated testing here, we are always think about the layers, boundaries, dividing the context, the boundary context in creating, and system LLM is not different, right? So we can have like a whole bunch of layers on top of the what we want LLM to do, and like testing unit testing only that part, right? Only that LLM stuff, and then use the normal testing and the normal discussion about testing, like testing the layers, testing integration, testing end-to-end stuff, on top of this kind, even for new stuff. So what I would ask you is that, can you help us here in our podcast and list this and make like some didactic explanation about these differentiations, about how do we divide the tests we can do
Okay. I'm I'm I'm
categorizing.
I'm going to. That's an interesting question, and the reason why I say that is that it's a very open-ended question, and I want people to realize that if I say something, it is just based on my experience, and it's not like I'm saying go do these things, or this is how you would divide stuff up, right? So
Right.
it's merely to have a discussion around how you could divide things up, and hopefully we have that kind of exchange and can talk through that. So if we're talking about the idea of are we talking about different types of testing? So are you thinking about like the difference between integration test versus like a unit test to test each layer and that kind of thing? Okay. So I guess if we're going to talk about that, if we really want to zero in on the different types, and people, this is the reason why I don't like to go into this, because people have so many different names for everything, right? You say something that's a name, they're like, no, it's not really that. And it's like, okay, fine, it is for you, you know.
Yeah.
That's kind of the thing here. But at the foundational level, you've got some categories of tests, right? You've got this idea of testing at the unit level. And, that's like test one thing, right? We're not going to test a lot of different things or how things can talk to each other. You're going to hopefully have a deterministic function that you're going to send some inputs in and you're going to get some output from. And sometimes in order to have it be deterministic, then you have to actually like mock out some of the dependencies, but you want to really minimize that as much as possible, pass as much into that function as you can. So you really can test the unit and be sure that the algorithm working on the inside is going to do what you want it to do, right?
Mhm.
And the reason why we would want to test at that level, especially when you're first starting to put something together, like maybe it's an algorithm that you're trying to be sure that you're testing thresholds properly or something like that. You're trying to be sure that things work at that level. Is that, and the reason why you want one thing at a time in these tests is because you want the test named something that makes sense. You want it to actually be making a single assertion so that when any of these tests start going wrong, you know exactly where it is. And even if you're testing at the unit level, but within a
Mhm.
different layer, you know that something happening in this layer is getting messed up, but your other layers are still fine, right? That's the
Uh-huh.
inside unit tests inside the layers, right?
Uh-huh.
But then you get to a point where you need to be sure the whole system's going to work. And this isn't like what I'm talking about, like a full system test where you want to like have it on the server and make it act like it's actually being used by people. That's kind of what your QA would do if you have QA. If you don't, then maybe you get by doing you do these full system tests on the other end where you have like something like Selenium come in and poke around on your website and try to do the analysis of what the HTML looks like, when it's done. Did things happen the way that it was supposed to? And I've been in places where we have a lot of those, and the problem with those tests operating at such a large level is just a sunspot might cause a problem. I'm being facetious here. I'm kidding, but I mean, a sunspot could hit something, and it might actually make that it might actually cause something to happen with those kind of tests. We had that happen all the time,
Mhm.
and it's a really
No.
bad place when you sit there and say, "Oh, the test didn't work today. The automated run of our front end test didn't work, and that's normal. We'll just move on." That's and the flip side of that is you have someone go spend 2 hours trying to figure out which system it depended on that wasn't running in development, and I've seen that, and
Uh-huh.
I've been involved in that too. So you've got that side of test, which also that's like testing everything to be sure it works from the outside, really. But
Uh-huh.
then like let's kind of get a little bit of a middle of the road here, and this is kind of where sometimes you might find a sweet spot. You don't have to test all the way outside. You can test maybe your entire application layer, mock
Mhm.
all the dependencies going out, mock all of the inputs coming, basically make it to where you could throw inputs from anywhere coming in, and you can test all the layers of your system communicating with each other that way. And I have written stuff to do this. Like in Python, it's pretty amazing because if all of your outbound ports are going over HTTP in Python, you can completely take over requests, which is a
Mhm.
library that we use to do like HTTP requests from within Python. You could actually take over that And at that point, nothing gets out. It's all going through your mocking layer of the internet at that point. So you can mock out all the communications with services and stuff like that. And I've done a couple of things with doing that to be sure that I can mock out all of my external microservices and make sure that everything that inside my application from all the different layers are going to do exactly what I expect them to do if I get responses this way or that way from the outside world. By simulate, I never change the code on the inside, right? It's just all I do is mock out that internet layer, and then my program only sees the world that I allow it to see at that point. So
I work in a system that does exactly like that. We have a unit tests. Of course, we test the layers. So we test like in algorithm level or small stuff. And if it works, it's like in a correct way. You can have small layers that has not so much dependencies, right? You can see that when you write a unit test and you have no much a lower number of mocks. If you have a high number of mocks to do one stuff, you can say, "Oh my God, this layer is too much coupled with the outer world," right? And maybe it's better to separate stuff here and make it less coupled. Okay, this is good. And then you have the integration layer. We call it integration, right? And integration without any calls to the outer world. So that's the idea. So, and using this Python libraries, we call it responses activate. When they say, "Oh, responses activate," and it looks like that superhero stuff. Oh, so the responses activate, and then and then you suddenly your system cannot do any calls to the other world, and then you can do and you can like say mocking all the other world responses. This is actually it's pretty cool, of course. But to make this work, we still need to have the database. We still need to have like caching or Redis stuff, right?
Yeah. Well, in Python, if you design your code right, and you push off the data access as far as you can into somewhere else, you can mock your data access because you have classes that are actually handling your data access layer at that level, and then you basically can say that now I own the database too. It may be I own the database, or you could even use regular ORM tools right now, and you can replace maybe your Postgres with a SQLite database and put whatever you want in the SQLite database and hit your tests. And see, the thing is, for me, is I want most of the world to be in a finite state, outside world to be in this finite state, so I can test what my code's going to do when it's in that state. And I'd like to do it with as few like direct mocks as possible. Right. And this is maybe a different.
You can say like, okay, I don't want to make any calls to the other world. I don't want to access database, or at least in a memory database only, just for the test I'm writing and wiping everything out again later that.
Yeah, but you don't want
anything I need.
Go ahead.
Sorry. No, I would say like everything I need, I can create a level of abstraction that I can like mock it, right? Mm-hmm. But of course, it depends on what you want, right? If in the case, for example, in databases, sometimes you have sometimes you want to see something in database, and you want to access the database actually to see. And so this is sometimes is good to have the access the database being actually accessed when you are calling your tests, but it's sometimes not. It depends, right?
Right, because what you're saying is this is a very usual a very common scenario, which is that, like for instance, let's say that you wrote your application and only ran it with SQLite being where the like SQL Alchemy was only told to go to SQLite, right? And then when it's time to go to production, you flip the switch and tell it it's going to be talking to Postgres. What's the odds of the everything just working perfectly by flipping the switch from SQLite to Postgres? Or even worse, what if it's like from Postgres to MySQL? In prod, Postgres and Dev and MySQL. Who would ever do that? But I'm saying that what you're talking about is the fact that there are constraints that the database system will put into place, and you're saying you have to take account for that, but you do that when you start doing your full integration, right? When you start doing your system test, is like you put it in Dev or you put it in UAT, and you start actually having someone do real things to it, and you'll find those kind of issues. But what you know is that all your algorithms are right. You just know that there's something weird going on in one of the components that you need to integrate at that point, is what you have, right? You don't. That's what I'm saying, is that if you can take the database and you can take all external dependencies out of the the context for testing, out of the surface area that you're having to test, then what happens is they become a different set of problems, and you can narrowly go in there and target them, instead of maybe having something that is an algorithmic issue and an issue with the database that gets confused. It's a way of isolating the problem, which is something I do a lot. I do a lot of isolating. I like to isolate things to where I know exactly what I'm dealing with, because in computers and in software development, that stuff gets intertwined, and you start getting into a half day of chasing something that really was like two problems, and you couldn't solve one without knowing the other one existed at that point. You have to find both of them.
For sure. Yeah, completely agree. This is and this is really interesting, right? When we are talking about testing here, and we say this is so important, and of course, when we think about sometimes we always have this problem saying, oh, I need to put this in production right now, and I cannot create the tests now. So this is an actual problem. It's something that happens. So how do we what we can do in these cases?
Let me ask you to think through something then. So maybe it's a question to ask yourself, which is that it's very context based, right? If you're in a startup where if you don't get the feature out there to let people use it, then the next funding round doesn't happen, then you just get the feature out there and see where it fails. You shoot whatever you throw all the things against the wall and you see what sticks, because the investors have to see. People who are potentially going to invest in your product have to actually see things that are actually moving. So if you're in that stage, you do what you have to get the software running, right? And so that one I have an answer for, which is basically been like a reed in the water. That's what you do in that situation. If you're going to work at a startup, that's what you're doing. You're probably just working 16-hour days, and you're bending like a reed in the water, just all over the place, trying to keep yourself going there. But if you're go ahead, man. It's context based for me, which is it just depends on how definite it has to be 100%, and that's how I adjust how much I fight back.
Yeah, and Indy, you said a risk based as well. So and Andrew says, okay, in that case you test in production, and sometimes it is. Right. I'm working today. Of course, I'm working in a startup today, and there are some cases we actually don't know. We actually don't know exactly what we need to build, because in startups we're trying to find the fit. We're trying to find what the users want. We don't know exactly if that feature will stay there like in the next 2 weeks, right? So this is and then you cannot think, you say you need to write perfect perfect code in the first time,
Right.
and then you can use something we are using today. Some we call feature flags. We
Hmm.
say, okay, we create a part of the software that is uh, uh, behind a feature flag, and then you can like turn it on for some small portion of the users, or some one or two users that you know, and you can call them and say, oh, I'm putting this feature here, try that first for us, please. And then you can see how, if it works or it's not. Of course, you have some kind of way to monitor it, and getting the logs or getting the events or getting amplitude charts or something like that. We
Yeah.
are using amplitude experiments. In this case, amplitude experiment, amplitude flags. Man, amplitude is a awesome tool for this kind of thing.
That's
It's
cool.
it's really cool. I can say I'm using here, and yeah, it's fantastic. And of course, and then you can like put this behind this flag, try out, see if it works, right? And of course, see if the user like it. Okay, user didn't like it, or we need to change something, and then you go change. And then you can, during this, while this thing is being tested, or A/B tested in this case, right? We can like, okay, we found some bug here, we found some other problem here, and then you go fix it, and you can say, okay, now we have something that is actually creating value enough to write some tests on top of it, or rewrite it in a better way. You know, this
Yeah.
is I think this is something that every time we discuss this with people that are much more, how can I say, uh, closed with all this testing stuff.
Yeah.
People, when if we say this thing, people will say, "Oh my god, you are saying something that's completely wrong." And I said,
I don't
"But
think so.
I don't think so."
Yeah, I don't think so either. Because I mean, it really is based on the feature flags things is really important, and the idea at the last job, at the current job that I'm in now, the phrase production acceptance testing is something that I use a lot. In fact, because some systems we do not have a lab replication of some of the systems. I work in networks, right? We don't have a duplicate network. We don't have like a entirely duplicate network that we just run that's exactly like the real network. So when we write automations on the network, we have to do a pretty good amount of production acceptance testing. I mean, one person, one of our product, one of our product owners basically went out and said it's GA, and I'm like, no, it's not, and it failed, and it caused all sorts of problems because I'm like, it's the first time we released this thing. What are you doing? It's called production acceptance testing. It's
Mhm.
not GA. You know,
Not
it's
GA. Yeah. Sometimes we call it alpha testing when we choose the users. It's the naming, right? When we choose the users, we call alpha testing, and then we choose. Oh, these users will see like some internal users we know,
yeah,
and they can see. Okay, okay, everything okay. We can do a beta testing. We call it here. Just saying, okay, it's 5% of the users will be able to see this feature, and then okay, now we can say, okay, everything is okay now, and now we can start the actual experiment. If the users are gonna like it, it's other stuff, right? But when we start this phase, we must know that it's working in production, right? So we passed these two phases before, right? The alpha testing, the beta testing, and then we actually put some, like a not big number of users to try out. So this is everything is in production here. We are in live.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah,
this is we. If in my case, I am much more confident to put these things, because of my unit and integration testing, right?
Yeah.
Because the integration testing is in the case I said to you, I put the database and some other stuff, but I mock the outer world. When I create integration tests for that, I can say, okay, it's working as I think it's gonna work. Then I can put some users to see it, right? And everything. And most of the time it's okay. So that's
Well,
the well, it's my experience, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm going to say that there's a stage before that, right? When you are really in creation stage, like you're making it from scratch and trying to get people from another department to start really looking at it and giving you input. At that
Mhm.
stage, you're just riding by the seat of your pants at that point. There's not really
Mhm.
a lot of testing or anything because first of all, when you're trying to get the feedback, you're trying to show them an interface that's doing things. You need to get a product out there that people can actually click on and see how things work. And in that kind of environment, I'm not stopping to write unit tests. I'm not stopping to write integration tests. I'm just going to say, what's the thing we want to present to the end user? And I'm going to get this thing out there until we start getting to a point where enough of a critical mass has happened. And believe me, that's a very small amount to get to the point where then you start going and getting it's like now it's time. The project needs to be more mature. We're going to put the tests in. We're going to do all this stuff now because people this is the direction we're heading in, and we know. So you try to make the try not to put the tests that are going to lock you into a way of doing things until you have some idea of this is from scratch, right? It sounds like you actually have a product where you're worried about 5% of the users being able to test it. At the stage that like one of the projects I'm working on now, which is a new internal tool, I'm just worried, I just want like the users to come tell us that what they think about it and what can we do to make it better. I want the people that's trying to get the feedback from the end user to be able to get the feedback from the end user. That's the main concern, is to have something moving. Authorization, authentication, and actual things that move around when they hit buttons. And then they can sit there and go, that's amazing. And things will go wrong, and things have gone wrong. But we're making the system more mature now that we've gotten to the point where we've gotten the initial feedback and we know what they'll use.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, let me say, go not the same thing. I think in this case, Pedro, it's a question of team organization culture or guidelines for sure. It's of sure, of course. There's all these decisions we are talking here. It's not like a developer decision. It's an organization decision, right? How are you gonna handle the risks of putting something in production, right? So this is uh, there's always a company discussion. Always, it's not
Yep.
like a developer one. It says sometimes I think there are cases where to keeping the contract is more important than the deploy process. So skip some tests, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I completely agree. Well, amazing discussion. I really enjoy it. Talking about testing is really nice. But unfortunately, we are in the end of our time now.
Yep.
And I think we can like have some minutes here to the last the our what do you can we wrap up this conversation here and have some topics to topics no have some final words on this topic for today.
Yeah.
You do you
Yeah.
want to start, Douglas?
Yeah, I think basically what it's come down to, which is every time I talk about testing, is that or anything in computer science, just overarching, and maybe anything ever, is that it's always about it's not absolute solutions, it's about trade-offs, right? It's about assessing the risk and basically saying that these are the acceptable risks, and we're going to take those, we're going to make trade-offs to be able to do other things from the other constraints that we have to keep into. So, you know, again, earlier in my career, I might have been really, uppity about I have to have tests and all this stuff, which I was. And I think I was still right in that one where I did the payment system. But there's also a trade off now, since I've worked in a lot of different other kinds of companies too, is that sometimes you will kill a company if you can't just move forward and do things. Like the company will never take off the ground if you can't just write some code and get some features out there to show people. So trade-offs. It's always about trade-offs, not about having the ultimate solution to solve all your problems. One statement.
Yeah, perfect, man. And you, Chila?
Yes, I think it was a very important point what Douglas mentioned with trade-off. And it's also a question if you want to, whether it makes sense to have a 100% test coverage, how much effort you need to put in to achieve that, if that's really something that proves that your software is good or not, or maybe even if you have got 100% coverage, it can happen that you were writing the wrong tests, and you just you can still have bugs. So
Yeah.
it's a trade-off. It's thinking about what I should concentrate on. So
Exactly.
a lot of
Perfect.
discussions what you can have about
Yeah.
it. Yes.
Yeah, completely agree, Chila. Yeah, I can say the same. It's, as I said, trade-offs, risk assessment, and of course, we need to know what we're doing, right? We need to know about testing. We are talking here from people that knows about testing and are choosing what to test and are discussing the risks. So if we don't know test and say, no, I don't want to learn about testing because I don't need to write testing before, I don't like to write tests. No, man, you need to know. If you're gonna write all the tests you're thinking, is another problem, right? Is the problem when you are doing the trade-offs, not before. It's not. It's after you know and after you trying, after you training about it, right? After you understand how to divide the layers, and after you understand how to create, how to understand the boundaries, So all this basis is before, and then you can think about risk assessment, you can think about trade-offs, and you can think about when you're not gonna, and think when you're not gonna write tests. This is a other discussion. This is the and then you can discuss this. So
Yeah.
that's my point. Well, and now I think we can go to the our last session of our podcast, something traditional we have here. And if we most in the end we mostly suggest any books to to the audience. But of course, now I think we are not suggesting only books. We're suggesting books, blogs, or a podcast, or anything we want to suggest to our audience to keep up with this topic or any other topic we want. How do you want to start?
You
Let
start.
me get here. Yeah, if you can send here in the chat, and I can put in the live chat. Let me get. Well, I let me find out. We discussed this test. I always love to find out the Martin Fowler integration test. This blog post here. Let me put here the Martin Fowler integration test blog post. When Martin Fowler discussed this, and he says the same. It's interesting because he says the same. Oh, some people say one name for this, say one name for that. Well, I'm choosing some names here, and I will put the discussion, right. And of course, and he's discussing about mockings, about doubles, about uh, if
Yeah.
integration test includes the outer word, if integration test does include the outer word. It's awesome article. I love it. So I'm putting here because if you wanna, this is I think it's obligatory to anyone who wanna learn about this kind of tests. Douglas, you send here, right?
I did. I sent a YouTube channel in, and this is more AI related. Now, I'm again in my free time, I'm looking at more AI related topics, and I think this guy's channel is really cool because he's talking about a lot of different topics. It's really easy to follow. He talks about fine tuning, trying different models, and all of this stuff. And I just kind of recently have been watching a good bit of content from Matthew Berman's channel on his escapades in AI, and I just really like his content. So I just thought I'd throw that out there as something that I've been watching lately.
Wow. Perfect, man. Oops, I tried to open here and starts talking.
Yes, for some reason YouTube will just start like their end video automatically. So yeah, be careful.
Yeah.
It up, it'll start talking to you.
And you, Chila, do you wanna share something?
Yes, my link is rather on the practical side. So I hope that it will be there. So this is a presentation speaker deck actually from Elias Nogueira, who is a test person who knows a lot about testing. And in this presentation, he's just in the first part, he was listing all the tools that in my opinion, every Java developer should know and should use and is actually using. So, and what I found is good in this here, that he also added some links to some examples just to emphasize what it's about. And at the end, he also adds some more testing tools that you can try and use based on your use case. So I found it interesting, and just you need to know about it.
Awesome, Chila. Awesome. Well, so I think we got the end of our session today. I can't thank you enough to join us today. I can thank you in the audience that were with us here, that send comments and discuss with us about testing, because testing is really important for our developer life. So thank you so much. Thank you, Chila. Thank you, Douglas. See you next time, guys.
See you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
all.
Bye. Thank you, Ronaldo.